Welcome to the Situation Room. I'm James Cary and I'm all about helping you write better sitcom scripts. Now, I want to think about some of the basics in writing sitcoms, and let's start with characters, because characters are probably the most important part of your sitcom. In fact, they are your sitcom, to the point where the word sitcom is actually misleading. It's short for situation comedy, and although the situation of your show might seem like the most obvious part of it, it isn't actually the most important necessarily. So I've written a number of sitcoms. I've written a sitcom about soldiers in Afghanistan called Bluestone 42. That's just up there. You can see it there. And I've also written a sitcom about code breakers in Bletchley Park called Hut 33. And I've also written a sitcom about management consultants called Think the Unthinkable. And that one's there. And actually, they're not really about soldiers, code breakers, management consultants. They're about Nick, Mary, Bird, Archie, Charles, Gordon, Ryan, Sophie, Daisy, Owen. They are the characters. And for fans of those shows, they sort of think about those characters, and the actual thought of them just sort of makes them smile, really. So although the setting of the show might feel intriguing, it might feel fresh and new, and that's all fine, actually we're not attracted to ideas and concepts half as much as we're attracted to people. And any photographer will tell you that you have to have faces, you have to get the eyes, because they know that we form a bond with other people. We are relational beings. So that's just as important with sitcom as well. And if you get into a sitcom, you start to feel like you know them. And actually, that's often why having a really good cast or a really good character from another sitcom kind of gives you that feeling of familiarity, which can often get a show off to a start, but doesn't always work. Obviously, one example of that is Del Boy, Only Fools and Horses, played by David Jason, who was already a famous comedy actor by that time. And but that character is amazing, isn't he? Del Boy, who says, "This time next year we'll be millionaires." And it's a show about survival and hope. But that is embodied in that character, and the alternative of that, of sort of despair a little bit with Rodney. So that's why I really recommend taking a lot of time over your characters. If you're having problems writing your show, if the plots aren't working, if the script is like pulling teeth, then it's probably because your characters aren't giving you what you need. Characters are fundamental. And of course, this may sound obvious, but it really isn't, judging by the scripts that I've read, where people make some really big mistakes. And let me just highlight two and almost what we can do about them. So the first mistake is a script that's sort of 100% banter. And, the sitcom is just people sitting around at work or talk, and they're talking and they're swapping jokes. It's just wisecracking. And it's an easy mistake to make because we want to make the audience laugh. And that's why the first episode is the hardest to write, because we don't know the characters yet. And we'll get down to that in a minute. But we need to show who the characters are and why we're going to enjoy spending time with them in this world. Otherwise, it's just going to be a string of jokes, and it does actually wear thin after a few pages because you're sort of waiting for something to happen. Now, we do want jokes, but when we're starting a show and we don't know the characters, we are going to have to work hard to get those laughs. So some good jokes are going to help. Who's got better jokes than Blackadder? Opening episode of Blackadder goes forth. We're kind of wondering, it's a new situation. What is this kind of Blackadder going to be like? What are we going to get in this series? And in the first scene, we get some amazing jokes that kind of would work anywhere, but especially from Blackadder. The line, if a hungry cannibal cracked your head open, there wouldn't be enough inside to cover a small water biscuit. George reading King and Country, soft, strong and thoroughly absorbent, all those sorts of lines. And also the end line of that particular scene indoors. I smell something fishy, and I'm not talking about the contents of Baldrick's apple crumble. So that's just kind of be funny anyway, even if you don't really know who Baldrick is. But actually the plot gets going pretty much straight away. And so the best sitcom jokes aren't actually just funny lines or wisecracks. They are this character saying these words to that character in that situation. And that's what makes it special, because we know the characters. And that is the vast majority of all sitcom jokes, which often don't have any funny words in them. They often don't have any funny turns of phrase in them necessarily. They're just funny because it's the character we know saying something to another character we know in a particular situation. And that's funny. That's jokes. That is the vast majority of sitcom jokes. So that's why we really need to think hard about our characters. And that's what I propose to do over the next few videos that are going to appear here. So that's problem one, is the banter problem, where it's just joke, 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 and we're not getting to know the characters. The second problem is where your character is just at the mercy of events. So quite often we might start with a script with characters talking and joking, and then something happens and the characters react, and then there might be more jokes, and then something else happens and there is more reaction, and there are more jokes if you're lucky, and then it ends. That might initially sound fine, but it isn't fine, because your character, your main character or your main duo or whoever, they're not making any choices. They're not active. They're passive. And you can't have a series of episodes of sitcoms where the protagonist isn't actually doing anything and just reacting. They don't have stuff done to them. It has to be stuff that they do, that they're trying to do. The question is, what are they trying to do? Make your characters active. That is the action point. The action point is action. Make your characters active. Ask the question, what do your characters want? So they'll do things if they want things. What do they want? So if you're having problems writing stories and storylines for your characters, and it just feels like it's not really going anywhere, it could well be because your characters are having stuff done to them because they don't actually want anything. So you need to work out, what does your character want? That's the big question that will drive them through 100 episodes, which is what the audience want, which is what your bank manager wants, which is what the producer or the script development person reading the script wants. They want characters that are going to last. There may be a big exciting story arc and adventure, and we can talk about that another time, but they want a character that wants stuff, that's going to get them out of bed every day. So you need to know what their calling is. And we're going to nuance that again with future videos. But for now, get moving, get your characters active and doing stuff, and figure out, what do they like to do? I have no idea what it is. Only you know the answer to that question for your sitcom. So it's kind of over to you. But again, let's just learn from the greats before we round off here. What does Del Boy want? What does Del Boy in Only Fools and Horses, the great British sitcom, and I've done a video about timely and timeless sitcoms, and I think Only Fools and Horses is kind of one of the ultimate sitcoms because it's timely and timeless. We hear throughout the show, this time next year we'll be millionaires. I don't know how many times it's said, maybe not that many, but it's just kind of stuck, hasn't it? Because it's that spirit of optimism that Del Boy has. And there's an integral relationship between two brothers, the optimist and the pessimist. And it gets very quickly kind of nuanced. So just have a look at that first scene of that first episode. I'll put a link below. There's a disagreement at the very start between Rodney and Grandad about Sidney Poitier, or Potter, as Grandad calls him. And Del walks out, makes a scene, by saying Harry Belafonte, which is already Harry Belafonte, which is funny. And then he goes and looks in the mirror and says to himself, s'il vous plaît, what an enigma. I get better looking every day. So he's obviously very sure of himself. He believes in himself. And then he says, I can't wait for tomorrow. And it's like, wow, what kind of a thing to say is that? And he means it. He's a go-getter. And then he talks about a meeting at 12, asks Rodney what he's doing. Rodney says he's doing the accounts. He reckons that he's being swindled out of money by his brother, and they're becoming business partners. So we're off to the races. It's just a really dynamic first scene, which I recommend having a look at. And it's amazing how quickly you can establish characters and get a story going in those first few minutes. But you have to have characters who want to do something, who want to achieve something. So look at the first episode of Blackadder Goes Forth. A service revolver arrives, which means there's going to be another big push, which is going to mean certain death. And so Blackadder tries to get out of it. He then sees a chance to be an artist, a war artist, for King and Country magazine. And then it turns out that George can paint really well, and he tries to make the most of that. And it all backfires on him, and then he has to resort to a Baldric plan at the end. So, I mean, it's not classically plotted, but you see what I mean in terms of it just gets going. So look at some of the classics, but just apply those lessons to yourself and think to yourself, what does my character want? What are they trying to achieve? What is going to be their driving force through the first 6 episodes, 12 episodes, 24 episodes, 36, 100 episodes? And if they don't have that drive, then you haven't actually got a character yet. And they don't have to be go-getters like Del Boy. They can be anything, but they have to want something. The way they go about it is entirely up to you. But that's the most important thing. What does your character want? And then next time we're going to look at what your character really wants, which is a whole other question. So keep an eye out for that. And also, I've done a really long version of talking about characters. So click below for a link to that, and you'll find out how you can access that video where I do a bit of a Q&A as well for a webinar that I did. So thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you next time.